Hey there guys, Dan Dix here from Press for Truth, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the prices of oil right now and how this is affecting the economy here in Canada. Now, with oil prices hitting less than $60 a barrel and the Bank of Canada admitting that home prices are overvalued by 30%, well, it's clear to me that the establishment is anticipating a crash. Now, for 6 years they've ignored the real causes, like central banking and fiat currency, and the effects of those causes. Inflated home prices, an economy that's dependent on commodity exports. If oil prices remain low, oil sands and oil pipeline projects just might not be completed because of insufficient demand. And if China's inflated commodity boom is over, or in other words, if China's done building ghost cities, well then what's going to become of Canada's export economy? See, Newfoundland was once a proud and independent country, and it suffered massive losses in the collapse of the cod industry. And of course, this is a collapse that was brought on by a lack of private property rights in the water. That is an issue which was never addressed, and it's still not being addressed now that offshore oil is being found off the coast of Newfoundland. And without oil or EI payments to subsidize the unemployment, well, what would become of Newfoundland? Retreat into government debt and obligations, or take advantage of their unique geographical position and free their markets? Oil's importance in Alberta is evident. It's feared that economic imbalances in real estate, brought about by low interest rates, will clash with low oil prices and bring about a correction in the markets. In other words, a recession. But this is not how the monetary authorities are seeing this. You see, Alberta's Premier Jim Prentice calls pipelines a nation-building project, and he is right in a sense. Just like the railways of old, connecting Canada with energy pipelines is the new confederation. It's the same old development, though, having crony capitalists exploit Crown-owned resources to export them abroad. In Canada, this is called the Staples theory of economic development. Now, there is a lie that Canada is an exporting nation. Okay, until the Great Depression, Canada grew its economy by keeping it freer than America's. Lower taxes and less regulation meant it was just generally easier to do business. Now, the dependency on exports is a lie to get every nation under the New World Order. Every nation state is to be an import-export economy dominated by an oligarchy elite under a world government. Right now, the Canadian question is whether a pipeline to America or the West Coast would make most sense. Opposition on Canada's West Coast is connected to left-wing foundations like Tides Canada. And opposition on Canada's West Coast can sometimes get violent, and, well, guess what? Violence can be controlled. And what of the violence in America? I mean, when Jesse Ventura was here as a guest on Press for Truth, he mentioned how a pipeline is a perfect target for a terrorist attack. And obviously tensions in America are already high right now. Police brutality is completely out of control, and the media has been making this out to be about race rather than the state versus you. Not to mention Obama's amnesty for illegals and the trillions in national debt. I mean, is this really the nation that Canada wants to work more closely with here? But regardless, a pipeline through America would certainly strengthen the economic union and help spread this idea of North America being an economic import-export powerhouse. See, working with Americans is something that Canadians generally do support, but as long as Americans accept their democratic republic one-party dictatorship, well, further economic integration is just going to promote the North American Union. And if Americans consent to D.C. and remain a crony capitalist police state, well, then Canadians are just going to have no incentive to do any business with them. Right now, the trend is to just hop into bed with the Chinese. And thanks to Brian Law's Access to Information Act request, we know that the Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Pallose was discussing China at Bilderberg. Particularly, he was using the RMB as a replacement for the American dollar. Now, since then, British Columbia has been issuing its debts in RMBs, while the Bank of Canada is now issuing press releases about working with China. So behind closed doors, the elite are betting on both horses. And in public, we're friendly with the Americans, but behind the scenes, well, we're getting in bed with the Chinese. Nowhere in this environment are the individual Canadian interests given any consideration. Canadian economic development has always been decided by British export interests, then America, and now the Chinese. But as we've seen in this past week, if China's commodity bubble bursts, the demand for Canada's resources may dry up. You just simply can't escape that economic reality. But we can, however, escape this system. See, I have nothing against developing resources for profit. Okay, that's how our civilization was built. I often hear Canadians say, well, we have the manpower to develop our resources here. Why do we want to send them off to Asia? Well, it's often asserted in response that we're part of an international division of labor and that we should focus on what we're good at. Well, I object to this assertion based on the fact that Canada is lacking in entrepreneurs. And these resources aren't privately owned by the first users, who in a lot of cases are First Nations. They're considered crown land, and individuals must pay royalties to develop it. Of course, not actually owning the land and just renting it causes wrong incentives for the developer. He no longer takes it into account any kind of long-term profitability because his books are just relying on short-term use of the resources in question. See, this is what ended up driving British Columbian deforestation or the collapse of the cod fishery out east. And it's not the fault of the laissez-faire capitalism, but rather government ownership of land. So the solution is homesteading crown land and decentralizing our political systems away from a single North American union. Individual sovereignty in a free market, entrepreneurship, private property, and a voluntary association are winning principles. Of course, how we're going to get ourselves from point A to B to C is not an easy question to answer, but just recognizing the destructive power of the government is essential for getting us anywhere. So if the price of oil is going to continue to drop further, or the TSX crashes, real estate prices collapse, and governments start talking about stimulus and cutting interest rates, I'm telling you, don't accept their lies. You can, however, make your voice heard if you'd like to show your support. Check out patreon.com and become a PFT patron. Here, a $5 commitment per month gets your name in the description of all of these videos here on YouTube. And together we can show the world that just printing money doesn't solve economic problems. So thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube if you're not already. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And check out patreon.com/pressfortruth if you want to show your support. And stay tuned for more video reports coming very soon to pressfortruth.ca.